What are some of the oldest tales of human beings dating back to the beginning of human life? What is something that has all kids scared at night? And what is something that has become one of the most popular themes in all pop culture and movies? Ghosts. Eidolism is the belief in ghosts. Sure, everybody's seen a scary movie or put a sheet over their head for Halloween, but how many people really know the real history behind the term ghost and the history behind the belief in ghosts? Ghosts date back all the way to the beginning of human time, documenting all the way back to ancient Egypt. So, History.com says that some of the earliest funerals were to help the spirit of the body move on into the afterlife. In this speech, I'm going to break down the history of the belief in ghosts, a couple well-documented encounters in haunted places in the country, and I'm going to go into a little bit behind the pop culture of ghosts. So the belief in ghosts dates back all the way to ancient Egypt. They were very big into their burial, and they used burial as a method to help the spirits of the bodies pass on, and then they also mummified people, and that's another depiction of a ghost in modern pop culture as a mummy. The Hebrew Bible references ghosts early on, and it compares spirits to occults, and Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 11 and 1 Samuel chapter 28 verse 19. The first well-documented ghost encounter was in the 1st century AD by Pliny the Younger. He was a Roman author, and he wrote in his letters that later became very famous because of this, that the specter of an old man with a long gray beard and rattling chains was haunting his house in Athens. The most frequent ghost encounter over the last few centuries is Anne Boleyn. She was the second wife of King Henry VIII, and she was executed in May of 1536 in the Tower of London for treason, adultery, and witchcraft. So that's a tourist place, and dating back all the way to after she got executed, there's been hundreds and hundreds of sightings of her ghost in the Tower of London and at her childhood house in Kent. Now I'm going to get into some haunted locations in America, starting with the Lemp Mansion. It was built in 1860 by William Lemp, and he later killed himself he shot himself in the basement, and then his son Freddie also killed himself, and then his wife 3 years later died of cancer, and then his other son William Lemp Jr. shot himself in the basement, and then 2 years later their Uncle Charles came and killed his dog in the basement, and about 30 years later it was turned into an orphanage, and ever since it was turned into an orphanage, the residents of the house have reported many signs of ghosts, including residents saying they had burning sensations and hearing banging on the walls. Now another one is the Villisca House in Iowa. In 1920, Josiah and Sarah Moore and their 4 kids and 2 guests were beaten to death, and the crime was never solved. This has quickly become maybe the most popular haunting destination in America. People pay up to $400 a night to stay there, and then according to housebeautiful.com, very famous ghost hunter Robert Larson stabbed himself after a night stay in that house. So that seems pretty realistic to me. And then on to my final part of this speech, the pop culture references, and I'm just going to mention 3 movies in this. The first one being the 1931 film Frankenstein, which was one of the first real popular horror movies, which depicted a mummy, somebody coming back to life. Frankenstein has been one of the main depictions of ghosts in American pop culture and has become one of the more popular depictions. The second film is the 1996 film Scream, which is just a depiction of the ghost in the sheet running around with a knife with a mask on, which is probably taken on to be the most popular depiction of a ghost. And then the final film, The Conjuring, which is supposed to be based on a true story, and it follows Ed and Lorraine Warren. They were 2 popular ghost hunters, and the story follows a 1971 family in Rhode Island who moves into a farmhouse only to find out that there's a satanic haunting going on. And this is supposed to be very well documented. There's supposedly real pictures that they show them in the movie and everything. And in this movie, the ghosts are depicted as spirits instead of more physical beings. And that kind of wraps up what I'm going to talk about for that. And I'm going to wrap this up before I give anybody nightmares. So in this speech, I talked about the history of the belief in ghosts, some supposed hauntings in America with well documentation, and the depiction of ghosts and how they've evolved in pop culture and the media throughout human history. All right, thank you all.